I'm Dr. Ralph Kimberlin. Well, you'll learn about me as we go through the year. I won't spend a lot of time telling you about all the great things I've done. But anyway, it's good to have you in the class. What I'd like to do, though, I'd like to learn a little bit about you. So let's see. Let's start with this young man over here.
My name is Colin Roberts. I'm from Lakeland, Florida.
You live close to where I do then. I live in Winter Haven.
I have a little bit of flight experience, mainly gliders in my sport. I'm an undergrad aerospace student. Play soccer and water ski.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Gavani. I'm from Lake Placid, Florida, and I'm a sport pilot, so I've got a little bit of flight experience,
Okay.
and I like surfing and swing dancing.
Hi everyone, I'm Harika. I'm a grad student and this is going to be my last semester.
Okay.
And before that, I just wanted to take an experience of flight. I feel that I'm an aeronautical engineer too. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Nico. I grew up in Southern Maine, and I'm a master's in aerospace doing the flight testing certificate. I've been flying. My dad was a pilot. My dad's dad was a pilot. My mom's dad was a pilot. So I've been flying forever.
You're
But
aviation family.
yes,
Right?
I'm not a pilot though. Type 1 diabetes sucks.
Okay. Well, I know some folks who have type 1 who.
You can do it, and I want to do like sport. I just haven't had the
Yeah.
time, blood sugar, or money to do it yet. So.
I have type 2 diabetes since 18 years ago. I had pancreatic cancer, and they took out a big chunk of my pancreas. So I immediately had type 2 diabetes.
Hello everyone, my name is Jamin Joshi. I'm from India. I'm pursuing Masters in Mechanical Engineering, and this is my elective over here. It's just to have an experience with the flight and how it works. That's the reason I opted for this course.
Okay. Kansas City?
Yep, I'm Jen from Kansas City, Missouri. I'm doing my master's in flight test engineering. And yeah, that's me.
And she's been, well, she's had to tolerate me at another semester. Anyhow.
Hi, I'm Leonardo. Just call me Leo. I'm from Brazil. I'm also an undergrad,
Okay.
and with the fast track to do the flight test engineering program.
All right, great.
Hey everyone, I'm Gary Wong. I'm from Hillsborough, New Jersey, and first year master, first semester. And I have no flight experience, so I'll let you guys handle the flying.
Okay, well, we'll try to get everybody up front. Okay. I like to, let you see what it feels like.
Westnick, I'm a retired Air Force. I work at AFTAC up in Patrick.
Oh,
I
okay.
like airplanes. I've been flying them. I got an ATP and A&P, and
All
I
right.
spent a lot of time learning how to fly airplanes, but this is a little more about airplanes fly, so it's catching my
All
interest.
right. I found that I was a pilot first, and then I started doing flight tests, and I found out what I didn't know about
Yeah.
airplanes.
I've been around the flight test community a little bit, so
My name is Jorge Alvarez. I'm from Colombia. I'm a senior avionics engineer at Rockwell College.
Okay.
I've been working on the touchscreen ProLine Fusion for King Air, CJs, and all the new avionics equipment. I do some flight testing for avionics. I want to learn more about the actual flight testing of the aircraft and how it works.
All right, great. I've been doing this I've been teaching now for 31 or 2 years. I actually lost track. But prior to that, I spent 10 years in industry. I worked at all of them, what was then the major general aviation manufacturers. Started at Cessna as a design engineer, discovered that what Cessna considered design wasn't what I considered design, and Beech was looking for flight test engineers. Prior to Cessna, I had spent least the last part of my time in the Air Force as a flight test engineer at Eglin, although they weren't called flight test engineers at Eglin at the time. But anyway, that's what I've been doing. Beach was looking for flight test engineers, and so I went across town and spent a couple of years at Beach. The industry took kind of a downturn. Rockwell in Albany, Georgia was looking for a test pilot, and having all my pilot qualifications and flight test engineer experience, I went to Rockwell as a test pilot, and I jumped out of my first airplane there, and then discovered I didn't know enough, so I went back to school at the University of Tennessee Space Institute because they had courses in flight testing. And left there, I got my master's. I left there, went to Piper in Lakeland, spent 4 years at Piper in Lakeland. And then from Piper, I got the opportunity to go back and teach, and so that's when I started teaching. So I've been doing this a while. Actually, my first solo flight was 53 years ago. It was a T-37 jet. It's been downhill ever since. You know, but anyway, we've got a Piper Cherokee 6 that we've acquired that we'll be using in this class. And we're going to divide you into flight groups, probably about 3 flight groups, okay? And what we want to do is have you, we'll rotate various positions. We're going to try to, we'll be concerned about the center of gravity. However, in performance, most of the time we want the center of gravity to be forward. And so we'll try to always do that. And we have some ballast we can put in the nose baggage compartment and that sort of thing. We'll do that. And so what I want to do, I need your name, weight, and oh, by the way, there is a textbook. I wrote the textbook. I'm not selling books, but I can get you a good deal on this textbook. I do recommend that you get a copy if you plan to do this. Okay, I mean, if that's in your plans that you want to do flight test, I spent a whole career writing that thing. So anyway, let me start over here. Give me your name and your weight, because we're going to have to divide you up into groups, and I don't want to get all of the large folks into one group. So that's kind of how we'll do this. And as that passes around, and make a note on there, check yes or no as to whether you'd like a book. It's not mandatory that you get a book. I will have the slides available, however, I can't put everything I know on these slides. Okay, so that's why I would recommend a book, particularly if you're interested in it. The other thing we have is we have a lab book. Well, first let me get a little bit ahead of myself here. This is a kind of a course outline, and we have a laboratory book that you'll need when we do the flights. So we'll start these around.
Hey Ralph, on the sign-in sheet, did you put like email and phone numbers for contact?
No, but let's. I did not do that. Please put your email and a phone number if you have a cell phone, that we can get in touch with you, because in case we're scheduled to fly and we can't, we'll need to be able to get in touch with you. Okay, everybody got a lab book?
There should be extras. I think I printed
Okay.
20.
Introduce Brian, who's the program chair for this program.
Hi, I'm Brian Kish. I'm, like you said, the program chair for flight test engineering. And my first flight test course I ever took was from Ralph back in the 1990s. So the first time I ever got and took a piece of data in an airplane was with Ralph. And so I like to say we're all students of Ralph, including our university president, Dr. McKay, is a student of Ralph. There's a story
I
there.
taught him to fly, okay?
And you'll find as you go to different conferences, different flight test organizations, we were at Gulfstream this summer, we were at Pax River this summer, and inevitably ran into someone and, hey, Ralph! So Ralph's, like I said. So we're honored to have Ralph part of Florida Tech and our lead test pilot for the Cherokee 6. But yeah, my background, I spent 20 years in the Air Force. 12 of that was as a flying flight test engineer. I went to the Air Force Test Pilot School. So I graduated from there in 1997. Went off, did some great flight test assignments, got a PhD at the Air Force Institute of Technology, and then got to go back to test pilot school as an instructor. So I was an instructor flight test engineer at the Air Force Test Pilot School for 3 years. So loved doing that. So when I retired from the Air Force in 2011, I retired out of Melbourne here. I was at Northrop Grumman's Joint Stars, and I was at the Combined Test Force there. And I said, wow, there's these planes flying overhead. They say Florida Tech, and they have engineering, and so flight test engineering. And I started a conversation through the Department of College of Engineering, through the Department of Mechanical Engineering. And Ralph started through the aeronautics, and we kind of met about a year later into the the university. I said, hey, Ralph Kimberlin, I know him. I took my first flight test class. And the program kind of got started there for a couple of years, and now it eventually moved over to College of Engineering. Now it's fully,
Or it should have been to begin with. But,
yeah. So it's SACS accredited. It's in the College of Engineering. It's been running at full strength for a year now. So anyway, that's my background. Thanks.
We've been introducing ourselves, so, are those extras back there? Yeah, this young lady gets some. We also have one other person who is both taking the course and is going to be doing some of the flying to give me a break. And Tommy Guest, she's not here today. She works at Sikorsky. She'll be here next week, and she will be helping out with some of the flying duties. Okay. All right. Questions about anything before we get started? Okay. Going around, we do want your name, weight, contact information, and whether or not you would like a copy of the textbook. I'm going to order some. I get them being the author, I get them from AIAA at a reduced price. If you buy it retail, it's $95. If you buy it as an AIAA member, it's $75. If you buy it through me, it's $65. Okay, so maybe if you'd like a book, we can certainly save you a lot of money by getting it now.
And the book covers 2 courses.
2 courses, this course and the follow-on course. So Jennifer can tell you about that because she was in the other course. All right. Questions before we get started? I'm told that we have to be out of here by 2 o'clock. And so we'll try to speed this up. You'll find that I have trouble, I guess, when I follow the occasionally telling a war story, or what some folks call a war story. Anyway, and I think that adds something to the class, a real life experience. So we will try to do that. Notice, by the way, before we get started with the lecture, that we're going to fly next week. So that means when that book gets around, I'm going to have to hurry or that piece of paper gets around that's got your names and weights and those things on it. I'm going to have to come up with what the flight groups are going to be, because we're going to fly next week. But we'll meet in here. We'll meet in here first, okay? And then we'll go to the airplane in the various groups. So anyway, with that, we're going to talk a little bit about flight testing. Why do we do it? Well, we have regulations and specifications, and probably more important, we might call them mission requirements. What is the airplane supposed to do? We can build a nice airplane that may fly, nobody will buy it. You know, I mean, that's possible. You can build something that will fly that will not sell. So, you know, what is its mission supposed to be? Now, I can tell you to begin with, the most difficult airplane to design and to a degree to flight test is an airplane that is supposed to do everything well. You know, it's easy to design an airplane for a given specified mission. Very difficult to design one that does everything well. Most general aviation airplanes, like the Cherokee 6 we're going to be flying in here in this course, was designed to try to do everything well. As a result, doesn't do anything very well. You know, it's just the nature of airplane design, okay? So, the mission requirements are important, and that's probably going to start things out. What is the purpose? You know, what is the mission of this airplane? Well, to do that, then we have some, you know, we want to develop new products, so we're going to do that for flight test. That's a part of the purpose. But from the safety standpoint, the FAA or the military has specifications and regulations and what have you that you have to comply with to make the airplane safe. And then from the university standpoint, we like to do research, as does the federal government and those kinds of organizations. And in many cases, companies do some research to lead to develop new products. So those are reasons why we do flight testing. Well, let's talk a little bit about the regulations that we have to deal with in this business. For fixed wing airplanes, we have, particularly for small airplanes like we're going to be dealing with in this course, we have the current rule is FAR Part 23. Now, previous to FAR Part 23, back in the 50s, I think the change occurred in 1958, was Civil Air Regulation 3. And prior to that, there was Civil Air Regulation 4, and going all the way back to 1926 was Aeronautical Bulletin 7A. Now I can tell you, I've got a copy of Aeronautical Bulletin 7A. It's about, or 8, it's about that thick. Today's rule is this thick. Okay, it's grown a bit. In fact, in addition to the rule itself, we have advisory circulars that go along with it. I've listed the flight test advisory circular down here, AC 23-8C. Advisory circulars are just that. They're advisory, they are not regulations. However, the FAA folks will sometimes try to kind of make it like it's a regulation. This is just an acceptable method of complying with the regulation. Okay, so that's a little different than what you might have been done with. For big airplanes, we have FAR 25, and prior to that it was CAR 4B. Today, you may still find, for instance, the Cherokee 6 we're going to fly in this course was certified under CAR 3. Even though it was built after the FAA had changed over to FAR 23, okay? So if you go out in this world and you deal with small airplanes, you may find that you're dealing with airplanes that were certified under the previous regulation, even today. Because as long as Piper keeps building Cherokee 6s, for instance, or Cessna building 172s, they can use the old rule. Now, the FAA is pushing real hard to try to get folks into using the current rule, because FAR 23 is about to change again. But in any case, that's one of the things that you have to be concerned about. For big airplanes, FAR 25 or CAR 4B, however, for big airplanes, the FAA sort of put their foot down and said, can't use CAR 4B anymore. The advisory circular for flight testing of those airplanes is 25-7A. For helicopters, small helicopters, FAR 27, and the previous one being CAR 6. You'll probably find a lot more helicopters that were certified under CAR 6, maybe than even FAR 27. The advisory circular is 27-1A. For big helicopters, if you're working down at Sikorsky on a big helicopter, it's FAR 29. The old rule was CAR 7. And the advisory circular is 29-2A. All airplanes these days have to be approved for noise, and unfortunately that's fell off the bottom of the chart here. Get that thing adjusted, but anyway, it is FAR Part 36, and there's special tests you have to do for measuring the noise. You get involved in that in the flight test business. Airplane engines are certified separately. FAR Part 33 is the rule for certifying an airplane engine, and the advisory circular that goes along with that is 33-2A. And for propellers, it's FAR 35. Propeller is certified separately also. So you can see, there's a whole bunch of rules that one must comply with in the businesses, but as a flight test person, you're going to be involved in all of them. In fact, I've got a report laying on my desk at home from a flight test that I did last week on a new propeller on an agricultural airplane that I flew last week. Okay, so that's, you get involved in all of those things as a flight test person. And one of the reasons I like flight tests, by the way, is you get the big picture. I tell this little story about when I went to Cessna as a design engineer. I was designing a gun installation for the A37B model, okay? Sitting next to me was a guy who was designing the aerial refueling system for the A-37B. Well, he got crossways of the bosses and got sent away, and he ended up getting a job for McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis at the time. And at the time, McDonnell Douglas was designing the DC-10. Well, he went there, and I got a letter from him sometime after he left, and he said he was in the left inboard flap group. I said, wait a minute, so there has to be a left outboard flap group, a right inboard flap group? And, you know, all of a sudden his vision of things had shrunk a lot from designing the aero refueling system for an airplane to probably some structural component in the left inboard flap of the DC-10. So flight test, you get the big picture, you get to see the whole thing. Well, military specifications, the military all changed some while back. If the military buys an off-the-shelf airplane, it's generally FAA certified, and many of these